Right? You should see
trial run. Let's see.
It should show up there.
Ooh, you can see my silverback streak.
Hang in there, everybody. Hang in there, everybody. We are just about ready to go. About 10 seconds out. Oh, I see it.
You see, up there it is. Look at me.
How about that?
Post.
Always fun. Welcome in to Living Low Sodium with Mary Schepp. Join Mary as she tickles your taste buds with her salty wit and her exceptional palate, all whilst guiding us through the land of low sodium. Of course, my LoSo lifestyle Living Low Sodium brought to you through the financial support of ReesesBarkery.com. Reese's Barkery and Pautique is an independent, family-owned pet food and supply store specializing in homemade treats and premium pet foods for your dogs and cats. Our family truly cares about your pets and their health. Your pets are always welcome to shop around at Reese's Barkery and Pautique. Visit us at 1313 North Riverside Drive in McHenry. Call us at 815-363-7297 or check us out at www.reesesbarkery.com. Today, let's talk about 100 years of nutritional studying.
Yeah, so I was, as always, in my free time, I research food.
In your free time.
So someone sent me a message the other day and said, where do you find the time to do all this? So now this past week I was cheating because this past week I was off work.
Uh-huh.
So we spent a lot of time cooking. But I love researching the food and the science behind it and how it affects your body and the different things. And it's part of the reason why that I'm able to do what I do and as healthy as I am without being on all these different medications and so on and so forth. It's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to research food. So as I'm looking through stuff, and I bought a magazine at the checkout because, impulse buy.
The National Enquirer.
Had pretty colors on the front of it. In the front, one of the main articles that they're showcasing says the truth about sodium. And of course, the first lines, and not to knock the article or anything, and it's not necessarily that it's a fallacy, but it's one of those, it's not really true either. The first line says, it helps keep food fresh and safe. Salt isn't really predominantly used as a preservative in foods, and canning and things like that. It's the canning process, the heating process, the pressurized process that preserves the food. Which is why, I can't can beef stew at home because you need a pressure canner and you either need to do it for a really high temperature for a really long time. And there's a lot of canners out there that are educated and smart enough to do it. I am not. I can do jam.
There we go.
Oh, I forgot your jam. Son of a biscuit.
I had a buddy who gave me some pepper jelly.
Yeah.
It's more like honey, but it's delicious.
Yes. So this one was a blueberry ginger jam. It's fantastic.
That sounds good.
But the majority of things that salt is used for is for flavoring. And it's so I'm looking through this magazine and it had a lot of really good information. And we're going to get into some of that a little bit later, but it got me thinking that the study of nutrients and how they affect our body and how food affects our body is not that old. Obviously, the Chinese, 5,000 years worth of, medicine and acupuncture and all these different things. It's not that we haven't been paying attention. I mean, Egyptians paid attention to, they discovered that, granted, a lot of them were toxic, like taking mercury if you had certain things.
Yeah. Whoops.
But they observed those things. But scientifically, breaking things down in our modern era, the study of nutrition is only about 100 years old. And that,
it's relatively young.
well, that's
right?
the thing. So I got a couple things because there's no way in hell I'm going to remember.
I've got to ask a question.
Yeah.
Did you finish the article?
It's half a page.
Oh, so yes.
Yeah, yes. That wasn't even like a trip to the bathroom. That was
right.
I finished like half the magazine.
Was the rest of it okay, or was it supporting that first paragraph?
So it does. Well, it's funny because this is another thing about, scientific study, especially in the current zombie apocalypse that we're weathering. Everybody has discovered that our scientific knowledge changes very quickly. So the same with salt. Depending on which side of the pond you live on will determine whether or not you're supposed to have 2,300 milligrams of sodium, 3,400 milligrams of sodium, or the ever infamous 2,000 milligrams or less is what's recommended for anybody here in the States that's, suggested to be on a low sodium diet. Someone like me who actually does have a chronic illness, it's recommended that you stay more around 1,500. The body, I think, needs between 250 and 500 milligrams of sodium per day to live. Everybody's different. Genetics are different. There's cultures that live on 250 milligrams, and there's some people that will be hyponatremic or hyper, whichever one it is. Low sodium, not have enough sodium. I start to get dizzy and lightheaded if I have less than 1,000 milligrams a day. So everybody's different. But that's what it's saying is, the scientist that they were quoting behind this article that said, when you're talking the difference between 1,500 and 2,300 milligrams a day, you're dancing around the head of a pin. Because the fact of the matter is the vast majority of people, especially in our American society, eat 4, 5, 6, 10,000 milligrams of sodium every single day. So when you're arguing over semantics between 1,500 and 2,300, when you're really only wanting to get people to eat less than 3,500 milligrams just to bring it down a little bit, that's what the gist of the article was, which is true. And like I said, everybody's different and everything changes. And based on the study, and more often than not, who is financially backing the study will oftentimes determine what the results are. But thinking about 100 years worth of nutritional study. So in 1905, an Englishman named William Fletcher became the first scientist to determine whether or not the removal of special factors known as vitamins from food would lead to reduced risk of disease. And they discovered that, coated rice versus uncoated rice, and there was a difference between these diseases. 1906, biochemist Frederick Hopkins found certain food factors, proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and minerals were important in the growth in the human body. And then we jump to 1912, where a Polish chemist, Kazimierz Funk, that is a fun name.
Like, oh, man.
Why can't we have names like that anymore? Right? I mean, come on.
Hey, who do you want on your team? I'll take Kazimierz Funk.
Right. Could you imagine
He's always first
yourself
pick,
as
right?
Kazimierz? What's your name, Kazimierz?
I'm Kazimierz Funk.
That's baller.
That is big baller.
Name the special nutritional parts of food. I'm guessing it's vitamin.
Yeah, vitamin.
After vita or vita, which meant life, and amine, which the amino acids and things of that nature, from the compounds found in the thiamine he isolated from rice husks. So it wasn't, I don't think, it was like 1920 or 1926 that they actually discovered the first vitamin, which was like vitamin E or vitamin A. My house was built in 1926.
Right. It's so bizarre. I'm just sitting here like, that is ridiculous to me.
So to put that in perspective, literally, like I just said, to put that in perspective, my house was built in 1926. It's stamped on the plat that was in 1926. Yeah. My grandfather was born in 1897. And my great-grandfather was 1853. So I can trace my lineage just by purely knowing, and my dad knowing who his grandpa was, or my mom knowing who her I used to go and have ice cream all the time with my great-grandfather. And to think that our knowledge of how food affects our body
I was just like, here,
isn't even as old as my grandfather.
Yeah, just sit down and eat.
Right.
So wild.
Right. So that when you sit here and you blindly take what you see on the TV or what you see on a label. Low fat, low sodium, low carb, low this, low that, healthy, healthy, healthy. Everything's heart healthy. It's got a heart stamped on it, which tells you that it's healthy. And it's horrible for you. Horrible. Like my soups. I've had this argument 1,000 times. Everybody probably is lying to me, but everybody tells me my soup is really good. And I don't put a lick of salt in it. But if I buy unsalted soup from the grocery store, it tastes like garbage.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's like I get bland.
Yeah.
I mean, if you boil a piece of chicken, it's bland and gross. If you grill a piece of chicken, it tastes delicious. That Maillard reaction that changes the proteins and the structure of the outside is what gives it flavor. So it's absolutely fantastic versus just boiling chicken. So sometimes the technique matters. The same with
Yeah, go get a chicken in a can.
Right. I mean,
Delicious.
I get why some of those things are things because, the war and famine and necessity, but we'll say.
But it's interesting, right? So we're in infancy. Of
very much so
of the science and food and how it really affects your body. However, right? We'll buy Captain Crunch, which has more science in it to stay crunchy and milk.
McDonald's French fries,
right? Than it is to we trust that more than we trust. I had a good friend who his job as an engineer was to create the glue that holds the bags together on cereal, so that it's easy to open yet stays closed, but also doesn't get on the food.
Right. And if it does, it doesn't kill anybody.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, little tidbit I learned in all my research and my boredom over the last week, the labels on your apple that say that it's organic or not organic with the little number on it are edible.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And I mean, at first I was like, why would they make that edible? Who's going to eat that? So then I thought of my brother-in-law, not because he's an idiot or anything like that. He's a very smart man and I love him dearly, but he's the kind of guy who he eats to live. I live to eat. Sure. I enjoy it. He will put a can of SpaghettiOs and poke a hole in it so it doesn't blow up. And I put it on his engine or his dashboard to get warm and eat it for lunch. Like he'll bring an apple and 2 tomatoes from his garden or something for lunch and just eat it. So I'm just picturing him grab an apple and he eats the whole thing, core, seeds, and all.
Ooh,
like he just eats it. It's sustenance. There's no reason not to. He's always done it that way. And the first time I saw him do it, I was just like mesmerized. Like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. He's like, why wouldn't you? He's like, it's never killed me. Is there something wrong with it? And that's what I pictured so now it makes sense to me why those little stickers are edible and why they have to be made of food grade, food safe stuff, because there's going to be someone, the little 5-year-old at the market who just takes a bite of everything. And I like the things, and you're right, the science that goes behind our food is insane, but the science of our food is just completely lacking.
Yeah.
It's just not there.
It's amazing.
Right.
Well, to your point, I mean, the typical USDA or whatever you want to call it, daily allowance of sodium is 3,400 milligrams.
Yeah, 34, 35, depending on which article you read. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yet people are up around 10,000.
Right.
I mean, that's just, your McDonald's French fries, a large fry, you've surpassed it.
So that's just because obviously, so I had a girl email me or send me a message the other day. Her and her husband are deaf, and we were chatting back and forth because she can't watch the show. I mean, the closed captions are okay, but not always perfect. And she was asking because I had tagged my thing as cirrhosis and her husband has cirrhosis, and she wanted to know about, what did I make? Meatloaf. Mm-hmm. She says, how come you can eat meat? Okay. So I said, and I responded back to her. I said, I don't know anything about liver disease. I don't. I took an extreme path. I quit drinking. I quit smoking. I completely overhauled my diet. I fasted, and I ate chicken and potatoes for a year before I weaned stuff out. So I did an extreme elimination diet to find out what and how my body reacted to things before I built back up. Because for those of you that don't know, red meats it's like a larger protein. It's a harder protein to digest, which is why if you have game meat, a lot of times they tell you to soak it in buttermilk or something of that nature. It helps it denature the proteins, to tenderize it, and so on and so forth. Hey, Deb. She was just bragging about my cinnamon roll recipe. She's one of my biggest cheerleaders. But she was asking how come I can eat meat. And, not everybody can eat meat. Not everybody, it's not a one size fits all kind of, you can take that path. And it's the same because I do what I do and I'm afforded the luxuries, I can splurge. Not everybody can do that. And a lot of us in the low sodium world, we have our cheat days. So with Lent and everything, not that I observe Lent anymore, in all honesty, but why not have a good excuse to go out and have some fish?
I was going to say, God just tuned in. What?
Right?
Yeah.
Mary knows what. Yeah, I was raised Catholic. I spent many days in church and Palm Sunday and Holy Week. And it's funny because on a side tangent, my husband's looking at me going, "How? I mean, I knew you were raised Catholic, but I didn't realize how much you knew about Catholicism, Christianity." I said, they only drill it into your skull so much before it's stamped on the back of your brain. So if I close my eyes, I can see it written like a tablet on the back of my skull.
That's right.
But I did. I cheated and went to Culver's because surprisingly enough, for a fast food joint, they got pretty good reviews for their fried fish. So I had fried fish. So of course, the first thing I do is look it up and see what's the nutritional specs. And the 3-piece fish meal with a roll and coleslaw, no fries, is upwards of 1,000 milligrams of sodium. Since I don't eat the coleslaw, it's not really I'm really just eating the fish.
Yeah.
It was doable for me. I can do a high meal like that for dinner. So I did, and it was actually pretty good. It was very tasty.
Yeah, their fish isn't bad at all. Yeah.
But now if you added French fries to the tune of another 500 for a small fry, and depending on how heavy-handed the 16-year-old is that works there, on the salt will determine whether or not that's 500 milligrams or 6,000. And then of course they give you, and this is where I thought it was funny, they give you 2 things of tartar sauce, which back in the day I would have been pissed. I would have been like, there should be like 6 in here. Like this, I'm going to use. But now that I don't really need I like to taste the food. Mm-hmm. I didn't even go through half of one. The lemon and just a little bit of tartar sauce here and there was plenty for me. And I could taste the salt in the tartar sauce, which is absurd to me.
Wow, that is crazy.
To taste salt in tartar sauce. But that's the thing is, you look at the science behind it, and on one hand, it's fascinating. But on the other hand, it's terrifying. Because how much of my doctor's input to me is just matter of opinion.
Sure.
They went to school.
Here's what I think.
Right.
Here's the latest in the journal.
So this is, I was taught that this, and this is how the body reacts to the proteins and sciencey stuff. And they're educated. And I'm not denying that they're way more educated than I am. But how often in your daily life do you take the lessons that you've learned and ascertain your own solution to a problem? You just fill in all the gaps and go, okay, so I knew a guy that once did it this way and this guy did it that way. And I know about this, and 1 + 1 is 12. And so we're going to go with this one. And you figure it out. So as someone who's been poked and prodded in every possible which way,
sure,
and $80,000 worth of blood work later, and they still can't figure out what's wrong with you, you're going, when are we going to get to the sciencey stuff? Because it feels like you guys are just guessing.
Well, I mean, when we were kids, you get a scratch, you put the orange stuff on there. What was that?
Iodine?
On everything. Oh, you got, here, let's put a little bit of this on there, And if you had any itches, you'd walk around with pink patches, from the calamine lotion.
I remember
Now,
that.
now I don't see any kids walking around with either one of
Right.
those on there,
Oh, I remember that. I got yelled at. I was
right?
picking away at the little thing because I was sitting in my little red chair in the middle of my living room with oven mitts on because I was stressed out, like beating myself. Oh my God, good times. Does everybody have these memories of covered in dots, looking like an alien?
Oh yeah.
So we talk about all the science behind food and nutrition and what they're starting to discover thanks to our lovely younger generation that's, hippie, holistic. I want organic everything, vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, whatever.
Something Tarian.
Yeah. You are partial vegetarian, not whatever. There's keto or not keto. What's the paleo? All of these.
Yeah.
So because of that, a lot of good things have come out of that. Mm-hmm. A lot of healthier options, lower sodium options. Just since I was diagnosed with liver disease in 2015, the amount of low sodium options is insanely different, which is fabulous. But of course, since nobody wants to voluntarily eat less salt, unless you are like me or a lot of my friends who have a debilitating disease and you have no choice, people go right back to the crappy high salt stuff because it tastes better. And that's why I always say it's a slippery slope. You should just not have salt.
Does it taste better?
That's what's messed up.
Right? Or have we been taught that it tastes better?
So Ben has gotten accustomed to saying lately that maybe in actuality, I'm a better cook because I can cook without salt.
Yeah.
And so many people, they seem embarrassed to tell me, or they're going to hurt my feelings when they tell me that, I can tell it doesn't have salt in it. I know that. I'm not stupid. I know what salted food tastes like. I went out to dinner not too long ago. I know what good food tastes like. And it's not that I'm bashing salt, and I get that it has a purpose. And even in my bread, because I can afford it, I put the smallest amount of sea salt just to help bring out the flavor a little bit. Doesn't mean I need 2 teaspoons of sea salt in there, like a lot of recipes call for. But that's the thing is when you can taste the salt in your ketchup, like are you tasting the salt or are you tasting the food? Right. And that's the thing is at what point are you eating salt just with a bunch of other stuff as a vehicle to get it in your face? Because that's pretty much what a potato chip is.
Yeah.
Is a vehicle to get seasoning in your mouth. Because if you were looking for the corn tortilla chip, you would just eat corn tortilla chips.
Right.
But you don't. You pick the Doritos instead. So the one thing that sucks, well, many things suck, but in the world of food, labels are awful because we rely so heavily on them. It's even newer than food science. And it's not as regulated as people think that it is.
Right.
It is regulated.
So what I found out with our good friend, Fred Dudek and Little Bird Kitchens, great new logo, by the way, is the interesting thing is that I found out is I have to come up with how much ingredient, if I want it labeled, I'm on this run, I've got to tell you what's in it.
Yep.
And then I just say, yeah, the rest of them, this is about what's in there.
Right.
Could be more, could be less. But when it was tested and passed for that label,
yep,
that's what was in it.
Yep.
And I find that very interesting.
And that's a lot. So you can Google it all you want. What percentage of salt called in the bread recipe that I use? So my bread recipe that is my go-to, if you go to mylosolifestyle.com, one of the first recipes up there is my honey wheat rye bread. That's my go-to recipe. For one huge loaf of bread or 2 small loaves, it's like a 1/4 teaspoon. It's a very small amount, and you don't have to put any salt in it at all, which I've been known to do that as well. But because I serve it and feed it to other people and I give it to my husband and we actually use it. If you also look on my page, the sandwich that I posted yesterday was my bread that I made. So you can eliminate salt completely from bread. It just takes a little bit more playing around with. The way I cheat with my bread is I use a sponge. So when you make bread and it tastes like cardboard, it's because you're eating flour. Bread isn't a complicated, I mean, it's science stuff, but it's not really a complicated thing. It's flour and yeast and water and salt if you're going to add it. That's it. But if you take and create a sponge, so I do a cup of flour, a cup of water, and a tablespoon of yeast, and you let it sit for like 4 hours. If you keep letting it sit and then take some out and feed it the next day and keep that process, you'll have what's called a sourdough starter. I seem to kill my starters. Nice. I'm not very good at keeping sourdough alive. So I stick with the sponge. Stick with what you're good at. It still tastes good. It's not quite as sour, but it adds a flavor to the bread that seems to be lacking when you can't put salt in it. So that's why I have a cheater on my salt.
Yeah, Kendra says, I think I'm addicted to salt. I tend to make the mistake of adding too much. It ruins the recipe.
And that it's funny because when people talk about, and I've said this in the past a lot, if you want to tell me that addiction isn't a real thing or a real problem or a real whatever, give up salt or sugar for a week. Not a lifetime, not ever, just a week. Salt or sugar. And you're right. And when I say salt is a slippery slope, it wasn't until probably this past year and a half or so that I would eat salted chips, lightly salted, stuff like that, simply because of the fact that it is a slippery slope. Once you start adding salt back into your diet, you want more salt and more salt and more salt. I used to be the girl at McDonald's or Wendy's that would salt my French fries and salt my ketchup.
My wife, yeah.
And it's like, I can't believe I used to salt my watermelon. I guess that's a Southern thing. I don't know. I'm not really from the South.
No, that's good. That brings
right.
out.
It's fantastic. And if I could do it now, I probably would. But that's the thing. Until it's almost like any other addiction, like alcohol or cigarettes or anything like that, until you know that you can have it and not need it, just get rid of it entirely. So that's what I did. And my sister, she gave me crap one day because she's like, it's not, it's whatever. It's not that they're like lightly salted. And I appreciated the gesture. She found some those lightly salted tortilla chips or something. So to you, they taste bland and gross. To me, I'm going to be like licking the potato chip because I'm only a year into this process. So it's difficult.
I'm laughing over here because I've given up sugar.
Right.
But Alice, my wife, will make some chocolate chip cookies or something. And you're just like, when they're gooey and you just got to eat them right out of the oven. Mm-hmm. And so I do that. But then I watch it at how long it takes me to be craving then more sugar.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter what, give me a pocket full of nerds or, whatever. It's just like, it's so interesting, that addiction. And I've been able to watch it and track it and be like, oh my gosh, if I have a cookie within 45 minutes, I'm up looking for more sugar.
Right.
It's weird.
And we're actually going to touch on that here in a little bit. So, hey, Nora, who do we got? Gwen, I don't put salt in my bread. Wheat germ adds some good flavor. You are 100% correct. If you ever have the ability to get your hands on some fresh milled flour to bake bread, that takes a little bit of practice, and you're probably going to have to cut it with some flour, because to bake with fresh milled bread or fresh milled flour, it absorbs water differently. So it's a little tricky, but it's when it's freshly milled, it still has the wheat germ and all of the oils and everything in it. It's fantastic. Kim Nordine, we have that.
Yeah. Mark says, in bread, I found a little citric acid will give it a little flavor in place of the salt.
100%.
And is that a 68 Charger there on your picture? I'm not quite sure what that is.
Yep.
Looks pretty good.
Mark Stewart. So when you think about labels, let's see here. From 1941 to 1966, when information on the calorie and sodium content was included on some food labels, those were considered by the Food and Drug Administration to be special dietary uses intended to meet particular dietary needs caused by physical, pathological, or other conditions. So now this is 41 to 66.
My
I
goodness.
believe my parents and my in-laws, all of them were born in 47.
Oh, 442. Nice.
So
68. I had the year right. Just
442.
442. Nice.
It is a beautiful car. So when you talk about food labels, and they didn't even, like, that wasn't even regulated. They just, if you're going to, and most of the time when they put it on something, it's because they wanted to brag about it. Like, you're low in sodium or you're low in this, like, take our medicine or take our whatever, eat our stuff because it's got what you need in it, because the doctors are finding out that, you know, through war and famine and all these other things that you need things.
Yeah.
So then you skip forward a lot, and believe me, there's a lot. Like every 3 to 5, 10 years, there's another food label, Food Drug Administration change. Like there's a whole, I could look it up. They're all over. And they just changed again not too long ago. But due to the increase in processed foods, because predominantly for many, many years, people ate fresh food. You made bean soup. You made you made it at home. You were cooking at home. You weren't bringing home. And then you've got the advent of, you know, TV dinners and processed stuff and freezers and all of these boxed goods and candies and stuff like that. So due to the increase in foods, 1969, the White House Conference on Food, Nutrition, and Health was the FDA, was that the FDA consider developing a system for identifying nutritional quantities for food. So in 1969, they started considering talking about making people get food labels.
That's the year of my birth. So literally, food labels
were thought about
when
you were born.
That's crazy.
So then skip forward a little bit. In 1972, the agency proposed regulations that specified a format to provide nutrition information on packaged food labels. So now from 69 to 72, because, you know, governments work really fast on stuff. Like you just like breakneck pace.
Right.
So now they've decided that they should have a set standard for this.
Hi, Nora.
So when finalized in 1973, these regulations specified that when nutrition labeling was present on labels of FDA-regulated foods, so not all foods, just FDA-regulated foods, it was to include the number of calories, grams of protein, carbohydrate, and fat, and the percent of recommended daily allowance for protein, vitamin A, C, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, calcium, and iron. Sodium, saturated fats, saturated fatty acids, and polyunsaturated fatty acids could also be included in at the manufacturer's discretion. So, as we've all determined that, you know, sodium is necessary for life.
Yeah.
Fat, as much as all of us like to have low fat, no fat diets, is necessary for life. It was to the manufacturer's discretion on whether or not they wanted to disclose
1973.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yep. Pretty sure my sister was born, both my sisters. Yeah, so my sister was 72. So now we go on and on and on and on. You can go through all of these regulations. In 2010, they decided this. In 2003, they decided that. 2016, they did this.
So in 69, they said, hey, let's get together. Maybe we should think about doing this with the food. In 72, they said, yeah, let's slap something on there.
Yep.
And here are and then in 73, they're like, here's what every label should have on there.
If it's an FDA regulated food.
Right.
So not all foods, just foods regulated by the FDA.
So now this is where all of your fancy diets and everything come in, right? Carbs.
They start, yeah. And
right? Because it's on the label. This is what you know what's on the label.
And that's where, you know, political lobbying with Big Ag and milk and, you know, all the food pyramid and all of that stuff saying that you need, you know, low fat. And for the most part, and the thing that stinks is in so many of these processes, and it's not that, you know, government's bad or government programs are bad or politicians are all bad, because it's always this split. You have people who get into it genuinely for the intent of changing things for good. And then, you know, it's like the Superman story. There's always a villain.
Yeah.
The whole world has a balance. Somebody is born and somebody dies. It is just, it's the natural way of the world. A star is born, one dies.
Circle of life.
It just continues to go on all platforms regardless. So if you have one person who's lobbying to tell you that you should eat real foods and you should eat less sugar and you should eat less fat, you have somebody saying, you know what, we need to support the milk industry because we can make billions of dollars, and let's tell everybody that you have to drink milk.
Yep.
And now we're discovering that almost all genetic lines are lactose intolerant and we shouldn't be drinking milk. So what are they going to... Right.
Yeah.
And
FDA, who pays the most, yeah.
That's... So it's funny to me because you have so many people that are fighting the good fight. They're the ones getting the labels slapped on stuff, and you have the people that are giving them pushback going, well, if you make these people do it, then, the little guys like Lil Bird, it's going to be impossible for them to be able to afford to bring their product to market to have all these testing. And so you want to be regulated, but you don't want to be regulated.
Right.
And so where's the line? The easy solution is don't rely solely on a label. If it says heart healthy, look at the ingredients. The one nice thing that did come out of labels is regardless of what kind of trickery they use, and they do,
Well,
especially now that they have more leeway in manipulating serving sizes, they have to list the ingredients by weight. So if you have a loaf of bread and it says, and of course they have to break down the wheat and what it is and all the stuff that's in the wheat, but if the base of it is, wheat, water, yeast, and salt. If it says salt, water, wheat, that means it has by weight the most salt.
More salt, yeah.
And then everything else. So just purely by reading the ingredients list. And the funny thing is the only time you ever hear about people talking about that is in dog food. Have you ever read the back of your dog food bag? It starts with barley and Bailey and this and hops and blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't say anything about beef until the very end, because you have to do it, like the most education you get out of reading a label, and people abide by it.
Yep.
Screw you and your health. But my dog has to eat damn good food.
That's right.
Which is true. I would do the same. We did the same thing.
My dog.
Oh, yeah. And Gwen is 100% right. We know labels can be wrong, especially if they're coming from overseas. There's so much lost in translation. It'll say 10 milligrams of sodium, and you're like, yeah, it's soy sauce, dude. It's 1,000 milligrams. Somebody missed a couple zeros.
Right. We moved the decimal.
So, yeah, it is watching the change in the science and how it comes out. And my favorite is the egg. Eggs are bad for you. Eggs are good for you. No, the egg whites are good for you. The egg yolks are bad for you. Well, no, you know what? We've learned a little bit more. So the egg yolks are good for you, and you should eat less egg whites. And then the eggs are good for you again. But now they're bad for you again, and then they're good for you. It's like, so at what point, and depending on where you are in your life and you acquire this knowledge, it's really hard to change your mind. If you spent 20 years of your life with someone telling you that you can't have eggs because they're high in cholesterol, and your dad had a heart attack, and then your dad died young, and you're in your brain, you're like, no, screw you. There's no way you're going to be able to convince me that I should eat eggs and they're healthy now because I know, because this was my family line. So how do you change someone's mind that that's all they know, when in actuality, the science now says completely different?
You make them a good omelet.
Right? Break out your cast iron.
Try this.
Someone posted in one of the cast iron groups posted a picture of his cast iron skillet, and it's just covered in egg schmutz. He says, how do I make scrambled eggs without this happening to my skillet? And there was, some of the opinions were absolutely hysterical, but the vast majority, which were correct, was, buddy, you need to strip and re-season your cast iron skillet because that thing is nasty looking.
That's bad. Yeah.
And so there was 2 or 3 guys that posted pictures of their cast iron skillet. Like, dude, I just made eggs this morning and this is mine, and it's like shining. Like I could do my makeup in this pan.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Right. Yeah, mine aren't like that. I have I got shameful cast iron.
No, it's good.
Dude, it's a long process to re-season your cast iron. We just haven't done it.
But back before, and I'm going to go back to the labeling and the science on this stuff. sometimes ignorance is bliss, right? I mean, before this, so you take a look at the 50s, 60s, 40s, hey, people were in pretty good shape,
Right.
not so fat and chunky like I am, right? And let's keep in mind, 1969. That's when the White House got together,
Right.
and said,
Started thinking about it.
So I maybe things are processed differently now, but at the same time, you kind of take a look at it and you go, well, geez,
So my thing is, so when you talk about
Morning, Gary.
lower, hey Gary, labels and whatnot, and so genetically, evolutionarily, you got like a koala bear. It is one of the few things that can eat eucalyptus leaves. It has evolved over hundreds and hundreds of years, however long they've been around, to process that specific thing. So when you want to talk about what we have evolved to eat over thousands of years and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of generations, so when they talk about fats being bad for you, saturated fats are bad for you, and eggs are bad for you, bacon's bad for you. And now the research is showing that saturated fats, which everybody says, don't eat meat,
Yeah.
eat lean, eat whatever. What did we eat before nutrition told us what to eat and before science told us what to eat? You ate straight up protein with no salt.
Meat and potatoes.
Whatever you could grow or pick from a tree, you ate it. And so when people are like, oh, get back to this, that, and the other, and non-processed, and even growing potatoes and crops and stuff like that, when you talk in the grand scheme of evolution and how long that we've genetically been learning how, down to a cellular level of what we can digest and what we should and shouldn't have. And you look at Samoan cultures and they're big dudes, and you look at Chinese cultures and they're little tiny dudes, and Ethiopians, they're called Ethiopians for a reason. They're running around all the time and they get to eat 3 berries.
Right.
And they're not starving. Like, they're perfectly content. They they shoot a porcupine and they split it between 22 of them. Each one of them gets 3 ounces, which just seems like torture to me. I'd eat the whole thing by myself. They'd probably shoot me.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean I gotta share? This is mine. Put it on a stick.
Shut up, I'm starving.
So they've discovered that saturated fats aren't necessarily bad for you.
Yeah.
Recent studies conclude that saturated fat does not, in fact, appear to increase the risk of heart disease. So what they discovered is originally, which is true, that saturated fat increases your bad cholesterol.
Yeah.
But it also increases your good cholesterol. And it doesn't increase the quantity of cholesterol. It increases the size of the lipid, whatever the sciencey thing is. So it doesn't make more of it. It just makes them a different size. So they've discovered that it doesn't really increase your risk of heart disease. What's the fat that you can't have? Not saturated fats, the other one. Silence on the radio.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be able to think about it.
Belly?
No, deli fats. Oh, I'll think about it in a minute. I'm sure I will. But there's still fats that are bad for you. There's polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, and saturated
trans
fats.
fat.
Trans fat. That's the one. That
Thank you,
still
Kendra.
have. Yes, trans
ding,
is.
ding, ding, ding. Tell
so
her what she's won, Johnny.
That's one through scientific study and observation and actual clinical trials that they've proven does increase your heart risk and your kidneys and livers and all that stuff. So they're discovering that saturated fat isn't necessarily bad for you. So you can have your meat. You shouldn't eat it every day, but you can have it. Mm-hmm. So now the reason why I bring up evolution is sugar. And we've discussed this in past episodes about having a bitter palate versus a sweet palate. So sugar thousands of years ago was rare. The only way to get sugar was fruit and honey. So unless you were some super smart, brave, willing to get stung guy that wanted to dig honey out of a tree, they didn't have foggers. You didn't put the bees to sleep.
Right,
you had to be the nutso guy who wanted to dig in there and dig out the honey. Or steal it from a bear, whatever. But when you think about it, you go back in time and there wasn't processed sugars and sugar canes and monk fruit and all. You literally had to eat fruit, which means you had to wait for a certain season.
Right.
And then depending on where you lived, you think a lot of people in Alaska are eating bananas?
Or any
in the
fruit,
Dakotas,
right.
Greenland, Russia, like all of these places, they didn't have a whole lot of those sweet fruits. And many of the fruits were more like cranberries and stuff like that were tart.
Yeah.
So to have sugar was rare. But sugar is safe energy. So from an evolutional standpoint, we are geared to seek out sugar. We have been trained that if we are making an effort to look for sugar, we have a dopamine rush. And if we find said sugar, we have another dopamine rush because it is free energy that is safe and not poisonous. Because there's virtually no fruits that are sweet, that are poisonous. Conversely, what we talked about in the past is when you have a sweet or a bitter palate, many people that have developed the gene to taste bitter food are called super tasters. And the reason why they can taste bitter food is because predominantly bitter foods are poisonous. So from an evolution standpoint, if you're the guy in my tribe who can like, oh yeah, no, you guys don't want it, we're going to watch, see, and then the one guy that says, no, I'll eat it, and he's toast. You go, see, I told you. You should have paid attention.
That's right.
So bitter and sweet play a very significant role in who we are and what we eat now. The problem is evolution's out the window. We can do whatever the hell we want now. Like that, that's
right.
There's like there's no, lions and tigers and bears chasing you across the county to find a cave to hide in. You can do whatever the hell you want. So you can hit Starbucks as much as you want. You can hit McDonald's as much as you want. And so you're hardwired to search for sugar. So when you talk about getting someone to change their shopping habits, their eating habits, their lifestyle, when down to the core cellular structure of your body, just thinking about finding sugar makes you happy. That's a hard fence to climb.
Yeah.
So it's when people ask like, oh, you make it look so easy. It's not. Like it, you don't think that I'm making cookies and eating sugar and salt anytime I get a chance to. But the easiest way to overcome that battle is like what you did, where you recognize how food makes you feel. Because you can flip that switch. So if you realize that food makes you feel bad, drinking milk makes you feel like garbage. If you acknowledge that, it's kind of like the same concept of sitting home to eat your dinner and not watching TV, not dicking around on your phone. You sit down and you eat your meal. Your body has the opportunity to realize that you've eaten, notice that it's full, and be done. And you decompress. And it's surprisingly like very healthy for you to do such a thing.
Well, if you take a look at, and for our listeners, if you think about any time that you've gone camping, you eat well, but you don't eat a ton.
Right.
Because you've slowed down, you've actually prepared it, and now you're like,
right.
I guess I'm full.
Yeah, one plate's enough. Wow, and normally I'd eat 6 plates of this. Well, normally you've got all this outside noise, static in your brain, and that's the thing. So when you realize the sugar crash or the upset stomach or the headache that comes along with it, all of those things. And it's funny because in the low sodium world, on a daily basis, people that come in to the low sodium groups and say, I've been low sodium for like 3 weeks. Has anybody else noticed that once they went low sodium, they get headaches, they get cramps, their legs are cramping up all night long. My legs are twitching. I can't stand it. Yeah, because you need that stuff to live. And almost always, every single person overdoes it. I'm not going to have any at all. I'm going to live on celery and apples.
It's hard to do.
That's not really good for you either. You just need to eat real food. And that's the hard part.
Here, give up soda. That's caffeine and sugar. Good luck.
So you want to talk about one of the most horrific things for you on the planet. Soda is it. It flat out, between the coloring, the chemicals, the sugar and the acid, you're literally willingly, enjoyingly drinking poison.
Yeah. 2011, I stopped.
For fun. Yeah, Ben and I, probably about the same time.
Yeah. Mostly
because we realized how much we were drinking. I think we went through like 3 cases or something in one weekend. I was like, seriously, we both looked at each other. We need to drink something else. Like, let's switch to soda water or something, because this is...
I quit cold turkey back in 2011.
Same. We just... Ben also, he had a year... right around the same time, he had his first episode of heartburn. Now, unfortunately, a very good friend of ours at that same time was in the hospital getting like 17 valves replaced or whatever. It was like quadruple, extuple, whatever bypass, cracked his chest open. And his heart ultimately ended up failing him a couple years later. But of course, then, he was panicking, thinking, not getting any younger, having a heart attack. We did the EKG, the whole 9 yards, ER, for them to go, you have heartburn.
Yeah.
In his defense, he never had it.
No,
so it's scary. It's terrifying. No. And his friend was sitting in the hospital, cracked open, getting fixed. So, but we were trying to think of what caused it. He had a Sparks, one of those caffeinated beers or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
And that's what caused it. So after that, we're like, done. No, we're not drinking any more of that crap.
Yeah. No, bad.
Glenn, it's funny you say that, because every once in a while I get a twinge. Be like, I want a Coke. I want a Pepsi. I want a something, Sprite, soda. And I get 2 sips into it, and it's like,
So the interesting thing is, and I used to drink a ton as well. And of course, it's just $1 at McDonald's.
Right. For 60 gallons of it.
Right. Or you go to the 7-Eleven and you do the suicide, in the big gulp. And, but no, I can't even tell you what soda would taste like.
It's
because I just drink rum. There's no rum and Coke. It's just rum.
Right. Well, that's Ben actually, I think it was yesterday. I asked him to make me a water. And he makes fun of me. He's like, I'm not really making you anything. You are. You're putting it in a glass. You're putting a straw in an ice cube.
Yeah, it's always better with ice in it.
Like, whatever. Yeah. Just then get me a water. I don't know what you want. Just I want a water. So it got him thinking. He says, how come you don't get the juice anymore? Because I used to get like a lemonade or something of that nature, orange juice, and would cut it with soda water. So it was like a quarter, a couple shots of juice, and the rest of my glass was soda water. When you do that with orange juice, it tastes like a mimosa. Oh, it's really nice.
Yeah, a little sparkly there. Yeah.
So it's, a little bubbly, a little bitter. But I did that because then I could have the lemonade or the juice that I like without all that sugar. So it was still a sweet, refreshing beverage without having a whole glass. Because if you drink 8 ounces of any kind of store-bought lemonade, it's like 6 days worth of sugar in one shot.
That's right.
And I told him, I said, I get my entire day's sugar in my morning coffee. I like black coffee. I like straight up lattes, which is just coffee.
Yeah.
But I do like fancy creamers.
Well, sweet cream in there. It's always good. Yeah.
So what do I want to give up? Do I want to give up a sugary lemonade drink that does nothing but gives me a straight main line of sugar in the afternoon? Or do I want to have my nice tasty coffee in the morning?
Trade it off.
So I have my coffee in the morning, and that's my shot of sugar.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the day, all of my sugar comes from whatever foods I eat, unless I make, peanut butter chocolate cookies, because those are amazing. And I ate like 19 of them.
Well, that's a whole different, that's another show.
They're not calorically low.
That's a different show.
Right. But it's funny because sugar, we're hardwired to seek out.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Salt is a learned habit because you don't come out of the womb seeking salt.
I'm about to eat a piece of strawberry cream cake.
Just
My
a
coffee
piece?
is sugar-free.
Just a piece? You mean, is it like half a cake?
Well, yeah, it's a quarter.
Right?
Yeah, it's just a big piece.
It would be a half cake.
That's right.
But I'm a little fatty. My husband and I, he was just making fun of me. I forget what we had, no joke, probably just got done eating. Like the water wasn't even dry in the sink from washing the dishes from lunch. What should we do for dinner? How could you be thinking about food? He's like, I haven't even sat down. Like I sat down, but he was finishing up the dishes, coming to sit down with me on the couch. He's like, how you haven't even,
Sure.
you're like, your butt's still cold from standing up. How are you wanting food?
So with all of this science and everything, and labels, and what is it? What's the answer? Is it food prep? Is it sit down and write out, here's my meals for the next week? Is it, and for people who are busy, that's always the excuse, right? And to your
Time.
point, and as you said at the beginning of the show, is unless it's life or death,
Right.
then you never have the time.
The number one recommended diet globally is reduced sodium.
Yeah.
Behind that is reduced sugar, reduced fat. So they're all in tandem, but nobody does it.
Yeah.
Nobody takes their health seriously until something happens. It takes that tragedy of either losing someone close to you, being diagnosed, or you yourself being diagnosed and having a scare. For people, it happened to me. I didn't even eat bad. Like we were already on the path of let's cut out soda. We still like to cook. We ate more real foods, but we still ate a lot of garbage.
Sure.
The honest answer is you need to know what you consume before you can change anything. You need to know how things affect you. You need to know how you react to foods.
Yep.
Until you know what to change. Like all of these new test kits where you can test how your body, if you're allergic to anything or all that stuff. I'm fascinated to see where they go in the near future. And I think it's funny because 23andMe, someone just did an article about how they're under scrutiny for some of their genetic testing not being 100. Dude, it's a $99 genetic test. This isn't like a $4,000 I want to know my entire genetic makeup. Right. Like, come on. You got to be kidding me. All of this stuff is still in its infancy. Mm-hmm. But the two things I always tell people is to know what you consume and to eat real food. So if you want chili, make it and freeze it. And honestly, there's like, if you make a big batch of chili or tacos or soup or whatever, mashed potatoes freeze fantastically.
Oh yeah.
You put them in a zip bag and you squish it flat. And literally like a bunch of 45 records in your freezer, you can just be like, oh, let's have some mashed potatoes and some chili. Sounds good. And we'll put the mashed taters with the chili, and then we'll dig through and we'll get some of this. And you can freeze pizza dough, like without even having the knowledge to be able to do all of canning and prepping and all this stuff. Granted, the zip bags aren't going to last forever in your freezer, but when you like to eat like I do, they don't have to.
Yeah.
Some people are preppers. Some people are, like you said, they're planners. They want to, I can't do that. I don't know what I want to eat on Friday. I can't do that. I mean,
so hard to do.
Yeah, no.
I don't know what I'm going to feel like. Yeah. Ellen says, I can deal with sodium limits, but I have a terrible time with the fluid restrictions.
That's a hard one. And I drink too much fluid because I drink coffee. Because I'll drink, and this is what's hilarious.
That's a diuretic too.
Yeah, not as much as people think, but yeah. You can down 17 venti whatevers and not bat an eye. Someone tells you need to drink 3 bottles of water in a day. You're like, oh my God, that's impossible. So horrible. I can't do that. It's like, it's really not that hard.
Not that hard.
So I have to force myself to drink more water and less sugar, because the same exact concept where it really is hard to monitor your liquid, especially when you're somebody like me or a lot of my fellow people, that the amount of liquid you consume significantly affects your life. even if you are watching your diet and you're low
Sure.
sodium, you eat one piece of watermelon too much, and the next thing you know, your leg is the size of Kentucky and you can't fit sweatpants on.
Right.
So it is. Let's see. Gwen says, yes, his books. I never know what his name is. Dick Loeb.
I think his name is Dick.
That's my father-in-law's name too. His recipe books are fantastic. So if you
Logue, so it's Dick Logue.
Loeb,
It could be Logue. Recipe
French,
books also list the amount of water and stuff, which really helps on the fluid restriction.
Yes, it does. It significantly helps. My book will not have that fanciness because I don't have that. Yeah.
Not quite that much fanciness, right?
It will not. But yes, I found with the fluid restrictions, if you get something that you know is a liter,
yep,
it makes it easier for me. So I have a liter water bottle, so I know that if I drink that bottle, I'm good.
There you go. Of course, that music means we're right at the back end of this show. If you want more advice and you want to find out more about living low sodium, check out
www.mylosolifestyle.com or my Facebook page, YouTube,
and soon a podcast out on anchor.fm, and we'll let everybody know when that happens. But stick around because that's soon to happen. We can't thank you enough for joining us, getting stuck in the net here, 216 The Net, and we can't thank, of course, our good friends. And there was a lot of talk about pet food over there.
Yeah.
Check them out, www.reesesbarkery.com. Now, it's an independent, family-owned pet food and supply store, and they specialize in homemade treats and premium pet foods for your dogs and cats. So I saw that there was a lot out there. Take them shopping with you right down at 1313 North Riverside Drive in McHenry. Give them a call at 815-363-7297. For all of us here at 216 The Net, enjoy the evening. Tune in tomorrow morning for our good friend, Uncle Pete in the morning, where you can hear some good tunes.
See you next week.